He stutters while trying to speak to the group with a nervous smile. He sits in the middle of several beautiful girls and questions if this situation is actually all right. The blushing girl quickly warns Sosuk to duck because the situation has become dangerous. A different girl smiles gently and playfully, asking if he was waiting for her. A third girl shyly points out his enthusiasm and uncomfortable excitement about being near them. The happy girl reaches out to him, confessing she's okay with doing this sort of thing with Sosuk. In the morning crowd, the story notes that nobody can foresee how life will shift for such a normal boy. He stands boldly with 4 girls next to him as the story announces he will create a harem on an empty island. A question appears on a plain background, asking what one item a person would bring to a lonely island. Sitting at his desk, he's confused about why he is at school instead of sleeping and asks himself if he's dreaming. 2 students talk behind him, amazed to be in what looks like a classroom. A girl near the window points outside in surprise, yelling for everyone to see. The scene outside is completely white, making him even more sure this is a dream. Students whisper nervously as odd noises move through the room. He looks at his usual Class A classmates and is amazed by how real the details are, making the dream seem true. A girl looks down in thought and slowly says, "Desert Island." Chiyu turns to Sosuk and asks what he plans to bring. As he looks back, he stares at Chiyu's chest in amazement, thinking about how even his childhood friend's body is perfectly copied in this dream. She calls him a creep while he hurriedly says sorry, noticing how real her angry reaction feels. Embarrassed, he rubs his cheek and tries to remember the question about what to take to a stranded island. Across the room, students cheerfully name items like bug spray, sunblock, and phones. 2 boys eagerly decide to bring soda and chips to share. Strange numbers show up on a gray background, going up with every answer. He spots something weird and turns to the front as Chiyu asks what is the matter. They both look at the board and see the number related to the island question has gone up. Another student simply says he would bring a lighter, and the count jumps again. Another boy boldly states he would take a gun, while his friend worriedly asks what he intends to shoot. Yet another student smiles and suggests a knife as the standard survival pick. Chiyu looks at the count in shock, wondering how many have answered. He sits in thought, then tells Chiyu he has decided. With a confident smile and a tight fist, he announces he would take the skill to craft things. Chiyu looks at him and doubtfully asks if that answer is permitted. He scratches his head, confessing he is ignoring the atmosphere and would not say that if this wasn't a dream. From his desk, he argues that since the question didn't stick to real objects, his choice should work. Agreeing with that reasoning, Chiyu decides she would pick healing magic. He leaps up happily, complimenting her idea of choosing magic to heal. Chiyu theatrically lifts her arm, promising to save Sosuken's life, while he laughs that her fantasy keeps putting him in deadly danger. Seeing her stand up, he looks up in shock as she says she also wants something specific if those answers are okay. Kano Shoko stands boldly before the class with her hands on her hips, her vibe intense. Standing behind his desk, he fights the urge to stare as she comes closer, feeling his eyes pulled toward her. He gathers his courage, sweat rolling down his face as he silently tells himself to move. She bends over him, laughing playfully about his staring eyes, while he makes a noise of embarrassed discomfort, knowing his thoughts are clear. With a happy smile, she remembers the comic Kano suggested, and decides she wants to bring the fluffy white animal from the story. He recalls the comic he read at lunch and wonders if Waka read the same one. Standing near his desk with hands on hips, she claims that living animals should count as one item. She frowns while thinking, then slowly begins to rethink her choice. Lighting up, she proudly says she wants the ability to call forth fluffy things. He smiles and agrees to her new choice, saying that stated that way, her wish is acceptable. Smiling, he stresses that his relationship with Chu isn't like that anyway, while she whispers about cheating and demands to know who he is talking about. Nearby, girls excitedly make up powers about perfect hair, not gaining weight, and shields. They are thrilled that such wishes might be granted. Watching them, he sees that the group is just playing a game of inventing abilities, but then feels something strange. Chu looks over with a little jump as he calls out to her. He points up and quietly tells Chu to look at the board. They stare at the rising number on the gray board as he sees it has reached 40. Weird white writing flashes on the gray background as something starts to turn on. A clear message appears in the empty space, stating that all answers are final and the move will start now. His eyes open wide in surprise as he wonders how many students saw the scary letters on the board. He suddenly reaches for Chu quickly, shouting her name as the world starts to twist. In the shaking classroom, he grabs her hand and they hold on together while other students panic. People yell for help and ask what is happening. As everything around them begins to float, looking at each other in the chaos, they say each other's names with fear and resolve. Holding on tight, they squeeze their joined hands as bright light covers them. Their held hands fade and disappear as their bodies are pulled away. The noise of crashing waves comes up under a sky of peaceful clouds. They lie passed out on a sandy beach, still holding hands as the water's edge surrounds them. He slowly sits up, asking with concern if Chu is okay, while she moans and wakes up next to him. With confused eyes, he whispers that this must surely still be a dream. Trying to convince himself, he looks at the hot sun, the ocean breeze, and the breaking waves. Shocked by how real everything feels, he feels the heat of Chu's fingers, realizing even her touch feels soft and real. Looking down at their feet in the sand, he finally admits this isn't a dream. He stands up with a serious look and decides they have really been moved to an unknown island. Looking at Chu, he admits that both of them are understandably nervous about where they are. He turns to her with determination, saying he will keep her safe no matter what. She walks next to him, holding his arm, and asks if this weird event counts as changing schools. He forces a crooked smile, thinking Chu is acting just like herself even now, then flinches as she squeezes his arm. Their hands stay locked together as they keep walking. He quietly admits he is scared too, his voice low as he says her name. She looks at him with soft eyes and says she is really happy he is there with her. Holding hands under the trees, they look at the shining ocean and vow to get through this trouble together. Looking across the beach, he suggests they should look around the nearby area first. He walks in the sand with Chu, checking his empty pockets and saying he has only his uniform and school shoes. Chu looks at the vast ocean and sees only beach and woods around them with no other islands visible. He scratches his head, wondering if their classmates were sent here too, and if this is actually the empty island from the dream. As she repeats the words deserted island in confusion, she steps hard on a loose stone. She stumbles forward with a yell, and he jumps to pull her back while shouting for Chu to be careful. Pain goes through her as her ankle turns, making her groan. She shows her bare foot, and they see the ankle is puffy and swollen. Sitting her down under the trees, he claims it is nothing while she worries they need to fix the injury. With a happy smile, he says it only matters that Chu is safe. She leans in close, eyes big, shocked by his words and his sudden seriousness. Her mouth opens as she quietly asks what is wrong, saying his name. He blushes as he sees how close she is and stammers that she is a bit too near. Trying to keep cool, he claims he will be okay and that his foot is fine, though his fast heartbeat shows his nervousness. Chu holds her hands over his ankle, whispering about simple healing magic. His leg shines with a soft light, and he looks in amazement at the warm energy moving through it. The puffiness disappears from his ankle, leaving him open-mouthed that it really got better. Chi lifts her fingers in a V-shape, deciding that the weird blackboard actually gave her abilities. He squeezes his hand tight with shining eyes, calling her power amazing. Turning red shyly, she confesses that being complimented so straightforwardly makes her embarrassed. With his hand on his chest, he reflects on how her quick nearness before made him nervous. She tips her head and asks what sort of ability he got, speaking to him with curiosity. Sitting with legs crossed, he questions out loud if he possesses crafting talent now, and worries about how to actually use them. A rush of power bursts around him, white fire spinning as his body responds. His eye opens wide in surprise as a new but strong feeling beats through him. Above the sound of the water, he tells Chi he has solved it and unlocked the crafting ability. He raises his shining hand in front of his face, silently trying out the new strength. A huge see-through window appears in the air, and he and Chi look up as it names itself the crafting skill. He looks at the hovering screen and whispers in doubt, asking what this crafting ability is. Reading the words, he finds out that it can turn objects detached from the ground into items, and says the odd word again carefully. Seeing a rock close by, he proposes testing the power on that stone while Chi observes. He pushes his hand out toward it and yells the command to itemize. Light shines around his hand as the stone's form flashes and shrinks into a small glowing object. They stare at his empty hand, understanding the rock is gone. Checking the new screen, he sees the stone listed one time and realizes this has to be the inventory.
Chi looks from behind his shoulder, confused by his mention of inventory and what he is looking at. He describes with a little smile that only he can see this screen, naming it an item box called inventory. Pointing at a huge rock, he and Chi choose to check if something that big can fit. He pushes his hand toward the giant stone again, strongly calling out, "Itemize." They wait quietly by the untouched rock as nothing happens at all. Walking around the unmoving rock, he realizes it is stuck in the dirt and figures it doesn't count as an object loose from the ground. He looks over the ocean and asks himself if the seawater itself can be utilized. He cups water in his hand and tries to itemize it as it leaks through his fingers. Kneeling near the beach, he looks at his wet hand and clarifies that seawater, like the stuck rocks, cannot be considered separated if it runs away too quickly. While Chi leans forward thinking lifting a shell, he suggests using it as a holder instead. He holds the shell full of seawater and calls for itemization on it. Light bursts around his hand as the shell and what is inside glow, leaving Chi looking in shock. Smiling widely, he states that it succeeded and that the shell is saved in his inventory. On the clear screen, he verifies that both a little shell and a small bit of seawater are now shown. Observing his hand, he notices with relief that the object has come out of the inventory. Showing the little shell in his hand, he clarifies that anything in the inventory can be utilized for making things. Drawings float on a patterned backdrop, explaining that makeable items are shown in the recipes menu. Reaching for the shining screen, he excitedly says he will at last look at the recipes list. He looks with big eyes at the recipe list and is amazed at how many various things he can build. Glancing from the screen to the shore, he notices that all the needed supplies are basic things sitting right there. With a thinking expression, he understands there might be more to open up. He tells Chi that if he can find new materials himself and succeed in itemizing them, the amount of recipes might increase. Looking at one another with happy smiles, they concur on the plan, while he adds there could still be secret rules. Noticing the salt symbol, he whispers that this recipe might contain another option. Standing on the beach thinking, he asks out loud if that important substance can be made too. Grinning with assurance, he says that if he can make it, living on this lonely island will get much simpler because of that essential supply. As new pictures for salt and fresh water blink in front of her, Chi takes a sharp breath in wonder. Chi looks at him nervously and asks if his attempt actually worked, since she cannot see anything yet.
Pointing proudly at the floating screens, he shows that the most key item for staying alive, drinkable water, has appeared. He opens his hand to show solid salt, and she looks up with a strange sound. Rubbing his head with a shy smile, he confesses that his own power seems weak compared to Chiyu's healing. She moves closer and argues his skill is very useful for surviving here. Chiyu puffs out her cheeks and holds her chest, trying to hide her shyness as she cheers him on. He lights up, laughing that she is totally right. Pointing at the screen while she stands on the beach, he promises her that the made water is marked safe to drink. Walking toward him, she guesses that the skill must have split the salt from the seawater and taken out other dirty stuff too. He remembers their science lessons and mentions that besides salt, seawater should also contain leftover brine called nagari. Looking at the screen, he agrees that is true, but points out that nagari does not seem to show up anywhere. As she walks back and forth in front of him, she asks if the system relies on how the user sees things or some secret rule to block things. While he admits he is confused, leaning his chin on his fist, he thinks maybe everything here works simply, like a video game. He points to a cute drawing of Chiyu as a fighter and explains that, like in games where weapons never wear out, items here might keep fixed traits. A small armored Chiyu cuts the air with a blunt sword as he says most games skip damage to keep the fun going. From above, he tells her that leaving out nagari is likely the same kind of shortcut to keep things simple to understand. With the crafting screens floating next to him, he adds that if every object showed hard chemical codes, his brain would crash and he could never use the power. Chiyu nods to agree, then quickly lifts her hands like claws, making him ask in confusion if she is copying a crab. His eyes get sharp with realization as he decides that, put simply, the power he got is something very unique. He walks next to Chiyu on the beach and thinks his creating skill must have been made just for Konosake, though he says it is just a hunch. He faces her with a serious expression and asks if Chiyu's healing magic might follow the same personal rule. Her look gets focused as she says she just thought of something. Standing straight in front of him, she explains that when she pictured herself as a white mage, her healing magic came with an extra spell included. Sitting on the sand, she reaches up and asks Sokon to show her his hand. With quiet focus, Chiyu lifts her palm and calls for cleaning magic. Light explodes around them as she holds his hand and lets out the cleaning magic. Their fingers brush softly as his palm shines perfectly clean. He is amazed at his clean hand, while she explains that the spell cleans and washes cuts or chosen places, which he thinks is very useful. Looking down on them, the story notes that cleaning and healing are usually different, but his white mage picture must have joined them together just as Chiyu thought. On a black background, he worries about the black board that threw them to this weird island and made them survive with just one picked power. Walking by the woods, he admits he wants to figure out how to go back to Japan, but decides staying alive must be the priority. Chiyu taps her chin and names what they need most right now: water, food, and a spot to sleep. He agrees from above and says those needs will be taken care of in that exact order. The crafting screen displays a wooden bowl recipe as he decides to collect supplies and get those 3 key things. She lifts her arm happily and asks for a backpack-style basket, while he smiles and says that once they make the simple tools, they will split their jobs. A stack of sticks and rocks sits at their feet as he decides these supplies should be enough for the beginning equipment. He pushes out his shining hand and loudly orders the skill to create. A stone axe and woven wooden basket show up instantly, leaving Chiyu amazed by how great they look. She smiles broadly and says his work is just what she expected from him, while he shifts uncomfortably and jokes about getting the standard fantasy hero praise. Seeing his small smile, she jokes that he actually looked happy with the nice words. Waves move under a sunny sky as a voice not in the scene tells them to start. The new stone axe hits a thick tree trunk with a hard strike. Breathing hard next to the fallen log, he notes that the tree must be completely cut from the ground for his skill to work, calling it an annoying rule. He faces the cut trunk and yells the order to turn it into an item. Seeing the screen show 53 pieces of common wood, he shouts happily that he succeeded. Chiyu smiles next to him and thanks him for the work, telling him he did a great job. While he looks surprised and doubtful, she makes a proud little fist and says that even though he was lazy at the start, he slowly got the hang of it. He replies with a happy smile and understands from her words that she had been watching him very carefully the entire time. Looking up from the trail, he compliments the full basket in Chiyu's arms and thanks her for gathering so much, while she hums to agree. He puts his hands together excitedly and asks to be treated with healing magic, and she gets shy as she tells him to please go ahead. Showing his hurt palms with a shy laugh, he admits he worked too hard because he knew he could depend on Chiyu's spells. Standing in front of him with a brave smile, she states that she hopes he gets to the point where he cannot live without her. While he questions if this is the right moment for those words, she moves closer from behind and again asks So to give his hand. Leaning in too close, she pushes forward so his hands touch her chest. They kneel facing each other as she gently takes his hands and uses basic healing bubbles of light floating around them. Relaxing with eyes closed, he enjoys how the magic seems to melt away both his pain and the deep tiredness in his whole body. Bright light shoots up into the trees as her voice says the treatment is done. He stretches with new energy and praises her, saying this skill level is just what he expects from Chiyu. With a proud but loving look, she tells him that because he is so cute, she will cancel any cost for the treatment, and he shouts that he is very grateful for her kindness. A crafting screen shows the plan for a wooden barrel he intends to make many of using their collected wood. He pushes his hand forward and explains that they will toss the finished barrels into the ocean. Barrels burst out around them in a bubbly rush as he starts the plan next to a surprised Chiyu. Standing on the sand, he calls back the full barrels with a wide movement and sends them flying back into his storage. Smiling over the floating screen, he tells Chiyu that by using seawater like this, they have gotten enough fresh water and salt. A new wooden water bottle appears in his hand, rough and closed tight. He drinks fast from the bottle with red cheeks, enjoying how the water wakes up his tired body. Chiyu drinks too, eyes glowing as she whispers that the water tastes incredibly good. Holding their bottles, they discuss how their classmates might be having a hard time elsewhere on the island. He frowns while thinking and wonders how the students who picked things like phones or chips are doing now. In a blurry memory, he remembers talking with Wanoshoko about abilities back in the classroom. That scene grows to other desks as he thinks that many students probably imagine some type of power which might now be keeping them alive. Looking up at the sky, he decides there is no point worrying about fights or far-off classmates right now. From the sandy trail, he says the next important thing should be food and a good place to sleep. He looks ahead with a serious face, noting that they do not know how long this survival challenge will last. Chiyu freezes as she realizes that from now on, with only the two of them here, they will be eating and sleeping together. In her embarrassed daydream, she pictures herself in daring clothes, shyly asking So if they will be sharing a bed. He turns quickly, face burning, and scolds himself inside for letting his thoughts go that way, while she tilts her head in confusion. Somewhere else in the woods, two girls run through the bushes on top of a giant fluffy white animal. Holding on to its back, they yell to one another about finding Kuno nearby. As the creature jumps forward, one of the girls smiles with wild excitement, shouting for them to move out. Riding the big white animal, they lean into the wind and push it to carry them straight to Kuno without waiting.